Greetings, dear friends, fellow programmers, and those aspiring to be. I would like to ask you, did you enjoy and found useful videos that I released in the series dedicated to dependency injection? If the answer was yes, I have a very pleasant news for you, because we're about to embark on a journey of discussing more advanced dependency injection features that are offered to us, so we would be able to utilize them and get the most out of the functionalities that we have at our disposal. So if that sounds interesting to you, and you would like to skyrocket your capabilities in ASP.NET Core, I highly recommend you to sit down, make yourself comfortable, and enjoy the video. So, in this video, we will get started and embark on this journey of talking about advanced dependency injection features, and I have to say, I personally was struggling when I encountered quite a few of these advanced features because they were not so simple and not something I found very commonly in books and courses that I was going through at the time. So I hope you will find these videos beneficial, and also you will find them very useful in your day-to-day coding life. So, are you ready to go from a good to awesome developer? I knew the answer was yes. So, let's go! In today's video, we will get things going by covering the topic of using scoped services inside of Singleton Services. So, yeah, you can actually do that. So, have you ever encountered a situation where you saw that it would be very beneficial if you were able to create a service that would have scoped lifetime and use it inside of a service that was already in use, but with Singleton lifetime? So, if you would like to see how it works in real life and in action, we're about to jump into Visual Studio and see how it goes. First of all, I would like to welcome you to our favorite Visual Studio environment. Here in front of us, we have a fairly simple service that is called Report Generator. And this service is going to be registered as a singleton, because in real life, when you are doing reporting, you usually do not need multiple instances of the service that is going to be dedicated to creating reports. You just need to create them, and a single service will suffice in most cases. So have in mind that we will register this service as a singleton. As I promised, here it is, it's a singleton. Indeed. When we get back here, we will see that we have a single method which is called generate report, and inside of it, we are creating a scope. And we need to create this scope because, as you can see right here, which is perfectly normal, in order to create a report, you need some data that will be fetched from the database and then used to populate the report. So, in order to do that and be able to fetch the data from the database, we need access to our dbContext. And as you are already probably familiar with the fact that dbContext should not be created with a singleton lifetime, because that way we will reuse a single instance of dbContext across the entire lifetime of our application, and that would be just plain wrong. So in our case, we need to create a scoped lifetime service dedicated to our dbContext. So that is exactly what we have done here. We are invoking our scope that we just created, we are then invoking its service provider property, and invoking getRequiredService on the service provider property, and we are fetching our dbContext instance. After we have done that, we will have our dbContext at our disposal, so we can do whatever we like with it. And of course, we get the service provider through our regular dependency injection process. We inject it basically through our constructor and populate it with an actual value. After that, we are using that instance, that private field, to create a new scope. Then we use the scope to get an instance that is of scoped lifetime for our database dbContext. And that is all fine and dandy, but when it comes to our dbContext, we would register it exactly the same way as we would in any other scenario. We would use the add context method that we are using in most cases. So there is nothing to mention or write home about in that regard. And basically this way we can run our scoped services within the context of our Singleton reporting service without any issues. Great stuff, right? And now that we are done covering our first advanced scenario of the day, it is time to proceed with another concept. Have you ever wondered, could you actually introduce some conditions and based on those conditions have different, like completely different implementations of your services? If you think it is possible, you are completely right, because it is a commonly supported thing and it's fairly straightforward to do it. Basically, you will just use regular if statement, provide the condition you are interested in, and then specify which implementation you want to use for a certain interface. Now, let me show you in an example. Right here, we have a simple email service interface, and we have two implementations of it, which are mock email service and a real email service. Let's say we want to have a mock version, which is going to be used in development or for testing. And we also have the real implementation, which is really going to send out emails. And you do not want to make your bills come great when you are just testing stuff out locally. In those cases, you can just basically use the mock version of the service and skip increasing your invoices. And now we need a way to actually decide which implementation should be used in certain situations. And as I explained just now, we want to use the mock version while we're in development state of our application, and we want to use the real implementation when we are in production. So let me show you how you can do just that in our program.cs file. So when we are here, we have the following. We have the access to our app's environment and check whether it's development. In this case, we negated the condition. So basically, we're checking whether the environment is not development. And if it is not development, we would like to then use the real email service implementation. But if it was development, we will just use mock email implementation, because that's exactly what we need in our play around sandbox version of a project. And it is as simple as that. You just note the condition, which can be whatever you want it to be, and you specify in which cases which implementations should be used. And basically this right here is one of the main reasons why dependency injection is so freaking awesome, because it allows you to switch entire implementations within just one line of code. And those implementations can change the behavior of your application completely. Like, you can have day-night differences with just changing one line of code. And finally, I would like to cover yet another advanced scenario where dependency injection is amazing. So I'm hoping that you are familiar with the concept of generics in C#, because this concept is great. It will allow you to reuse the same functionalities and get even better performance while working with generic types when compared to hard-coded concrete types. When you stumble those two things together, you get an amazing deal. So when we are working with generics and we still want to utilize dependency injection, you will need to do some configuration in your program.cs file. So in this section of the video, we will be talking about just how to do that. So here I have prepared for you a repository. Of course, it's a very simple mock repository that we will just use to explain the concept. Right here, we have a public interface called iRepository, and we are providing a generic type for it. And then inside of it, we have just two methods, which are add and getAll. Both of those working with the generic type we have defined here in our iRepository interface. So these two can work with basically any type in theory. On the other hand, when we take a look at the concrete type for our repository and the implementation, which we do not care about to be honest, we have the following. So we inherit from the interface we just described, and we also have, again, the generic type T, and when it comes to methods, we have just a simple empty implementation for both add and getAll methods, and we just do nothing. We do not care about the actual implementations of those. We just want to prevent compiler from screaming at us. So when we have done this and put everything in place without any errors, we can proceed to our program.cs file and see how to register our repository service. So we are getting started in the same exact way as we usually would. We are using builder services, then using method addScope, which is standard procedure, and then we are doing something differently. If you remember, usually we are using angled brackets to specify the type, or we are using this notation where we are specifying both the interface and the concrete implementation, and this notation would make perfect sense in this scenario. But right here, because we are working with generics, we cannot do it that way. We need to do something different a bit. We are going to fetch the type of our interface, and also you can see here that ReSharper is figuring out for us what is going on here. So we have service type. We need to provide basically the service type, which is going to be our iRepository interface of type T, and also the implementation type, which is going to be repository of T again. So this right here is the proper way to define your dependency injection containers for generic services. So it's a bit different than the regular procedure, but still not too overly complex. And now that we have learned those three very useful advanced dependency injection features, I would like to invite you to take some time from your busy day and make a simple example where you will apply the newly acquired knowledges in action, because that's the best way to solidify the knowledge and maybe even struggle a bit because something will break definitely. But in the end, you will master it and have it in your mind for a very long time if you do that. So yes, that was everything I've prepared for you in this video. I would like to thank you for watching and wish you an amazing day. Happy coding!